Hey there YouTube, I'm Yukitsu, this is the Yukitsu Times, welcome to my channel, welcome to more Rome 2 Total War, and welcome to another talk about other factions that might have a little bit more difficulty in this game, and a little bit about how to cope with being them. And unlike the last one, which was about sort of Athens, Carthage, Pontus, all those sort of combined, this one's about Sparta, and that's because Sparta is in a fairly unique place compared to those other ones. Now if we look at like Carthage, for instance, we can see that these guys have not got very many elite power infantry, but they've got okay shock cavalry. Noble cavalry is not the best around, it's not the worst around. They've got elephants, which are excellent, and they've got some decent holding infantry of all sorts of various grades. We go over to Athens, it's the same sort of story. They've got good shock cavalry, maybe not the best around, definitely not the worst around. They've got a lot of different holding troops, they've got some good missile infantry. And Athenian missile infantry is something I actually like quite a bit. We look at Pontus, they've got excellent missile units, they've got some decent holding units, they've got good elite shock cavalry, a little bit better than the others even, and they've also got some decent Scythian horse archers, the horse cavalry, or archer cavalry, and all those combined let those sort of factions do that sort of hammer and anvil strike. They can win the cavalry fight by having overwhelming cavalry, they can be equal in the melee infantry fight by just having extremely efficient, low-cost infantry that's very durable. But Sparta can't do that, and that's because Sparta's only cavalry is the citizen cavalry, and all their missile infantry is kind of lame. I mean, if you look at these guys are not going to win you a battle through their force of missile power by themselves. So what have they got? Well, they've got Royal Spartans, which are kind of they're a decent unit, but in all honesty, I don't like these guys all that much. If we were to take Athens over here, and we were to sort of look at these guys compared to the much cheaper mercenary veteran hoplites, the mercenary veteran hoplites have actually fairly similar statistics. I mean, if you look at their damage and their melee attack values, they're very similar. The charge bonus doesn't really matter. The melee defense bonuses are fairly similar. Their armor is the same. Their health is higher. All Spartan units have a little bit higher health, but it's not by much. So basically, they end up paying 220 for a little bit more base morale, and you know, that's just not really that great. Well, it's actually quite a bit more base morale, but still not enough, really, in my opinion, to justify that high price. There's regular Spartan hoplites as well. They're not anything special. They're pretty much just hoplites with a little bit more health. So Sparta has a ton of these sort of ineffective or inefficient units that are not necessarily all that good, who don't really deal damage all that efficiently, but who are fairly tough and fairly durable. It's just that they're not even that cost effective. What's really cost effective for them is the Spartan pikemen. These guys can really sort of take a beating compared to other varieties of infantry in their category, and that helps them to a certain degree win direct infantry fights. The problem is that pikes, you know, you can bypass them, so they have to take a lot of pikes to stop that from happening. Now, if you look at the army I'm sort of setting up here, it's got a lot of hoplites, it's got a lot of pikemen, it's got just basically sort of spear spam of a sort. Now, we can sort of vary it up a little bit, but the problem is that adding in a lot of missile infantry makes it so that you sort of have to box to protect them. If you add a lot of cavalry, you need a lot of citizen cavalry before you can actually form a proper hammer and anvil strike with the Spartan faction, even though that, when you can pull it off, is wonderful. So let's look at these guys in just a quick battle here. Okay, welcome back. Welcome to the battlefield. As you can see, we've got ourselves a Spartan force in Octuteron against the Seleucids, which we'll see in a moment. As you can see, I've got a ridiculously large number of pike units that I'm just going to use as my sort of front center here. And they're going to be a useful sort of killing tool if I can get to grips with my opponent in a direct manner. Now, if my opponent has got a lot of pikes of his own, especially those silver shields, I'll have to outmaneuver him, which is fine by me. I'm perfectly happy getting into a much more maneuver-based fight, since I have got plenty of hoplites as well. And my opponent probably can't afford both hoplites and the rest of all those good units that he would want to take if he's taking things like silver shield pikemen. He can't have a lot of silver shield pikemen and good hoplites to guard his flanks, shield bearer hoplites to guard those flanks. Or my opponent will just completely rage quit. Okay, well, let's get ourselves another battle in a second. Okay, and welcome to another one. Welcome to the battlefield yet again. And we're just going to set our Spartans up in a typical sort of pike line here. We're going to anchor our flanks in the traditional manner with hoplites. And going to keep another hoplite in the rear just in case something happens. We're up against an Arverni faction, so you never know when they're just going to be able to somehow plow straight through your lines. Now, the strength of the Spartan army in its sort of general sense is that it's got units that are a little bit tougher than the equivalent from other factions, but that's not really enough to let them win since they don't really have the damage necessarily to back them up. So what you have to do is make sure that you've got enough numbers to sort of overwhelm your opponent in whatever situation you're fighting them in. And make sure as well that if you can, you're fighting them such that your pikes are getting them front on. And one of the ways to do that is to tie them up with your hoplites and then start walking your phalanxes into them. And that's the sort of strategy I've got going with this particular army. So if my opponent's deciding he's going to try and run around my flanks with his units, I can actually tie them up with my hoplites, and while they're trying to move around to flank my army to stop my pikes from working, I can simply move my pikes in so the units tangled up in my hoplite formations, and then base the rest of my line by moving around those hoplites. Okay, so we're going to move up ahead here. I just want to get a bit of a glimpse of what's going on. That's what I'm going to use my Tarentines for. I bring Tarentine cavalry with this particular army composition because you're not going to win any cavalry fights with citizen cavalry with Sparta, especially since you don't want to overinvest in citizen cavalry by themselves. Especially with the way things are, melee cavalry just isn't as good as skirmisher cavalry or heavy shock cavalry. So basically they have sort of fallen out of their niche a little bit. Let's see here. So for the purpose of hunting missile units, skirmisher cavalry is perfectly viable. You don't really need to have a heavier sort of unit to do it for you. So if we look at our opponent's army, he's got lots of Oathsworn, he's got some Celtic Slingers, lots and lots and lots and lots of Oathsworn, because that's sort of what you do when you're playing as the Arverni. I think he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6... He's got 6 units of the bastards. So that's going to be something of a concern for me, because his infantry definitely outclasses mine, but let's get ourselves into melee here. Now, his cavalry I don't really have to worry about, even though Noble Horse is theoretically very powerful and very scary. I have so many hoplites that they're just going to get ground down to nothing without being able to really do a whole lot about me. Let's get these Tarentines up there to skirmish a little bit. See if we can peg away at those Celtic skirmishers or draw them out of position at all here. Yeah, it looks like we'll be able to draw them forward a little bit. Okay, so let's see if we can get some shots at these guys here. Need to pull out my pikes. Okay, so we're going to start moving our lines forward, and we want to move our lines such that they'll wind up behind our opponent should they decide that they're going to engage us here. We've got some units behind that are prepared to basically prepared in their own way to counter our opponent's movements if necessary by going around their flanks, by hitting him where it counts. Or sorry, I've got some back units here if he tries to do that to me. Let's see here. Okay, it looks like I'm going to get a good example of holding him with a hoplite unit and then killing him with a different unit right here. And we can also get these slingers here, I think. Okay, let's get our... Uh-oh. Okay, looks like you got one unit caught. So Royal Spartans back here should be able to make a decent showing for themselves.
As you command. Canteen cavalry! Engage! Spartan pikes! Understood!
So you can see our Spartan pike formations have sort of started plowing straight through the our Verney lines here, which is very good. And he's gotten his general caught on my general. Now, my general will beat an Verney general just because of the way the pike dynamic works. Or sorry, the spears dynamic works. And frankly, I've got a more elite unit anyway, so we're pretty much good here. Looks like his entire infantry line is finished shattering, so we basically just walked through him. Now, I would say again that this is a really weak army, this Spartan army that I've taken. And I'm going to basically stand by that despite this sort of victory. And that's because the Spartan army is really one-dimensional. It's, well, maybe weak is the wrong word here. Maybe the word that I should be using is that they're boring. And, you know, I would stand by that statement. They just really don't have a lot of the interesting tools that other factions have to make for a diverse army. It's just lots and lots and lots of spears, which can be effective, don't get me wrong, but it's just not entertaining since you're just spamming the same unit over and over again. Even my dog agrees. My dog's just like, yep, Spartans are bad. And what's worse, they sort of play like a horde army. You would like Spartans to be a sort of elite faction, but they're not. They're really one of the most horde-like armies in the game right now. And I think that sort of doesn't capture the character of what people want from Spartans. I think it might be one of the best ways to represent having a... It's one of the few ways that you can actually play this game when you're trying to represent huge amounts of infantry or very disciplined infantry, is to say that, you know, well, they've got larger numbers so that you can actually use those pikes. The problem is that, like, you know, normally what they would try to do is have themselves anchored by terrain rather than try and have a pike line that stretches from horizon to horizon. That's, you know, pretty just boring, honestly. It would be nice if there was the sort of terrain that would allow the Spartans to have smaller, more compact elite armies, make them more situationally good. But as it is, they've got these large, swarm-like, boring armies. Now, they're very effective against these sort of oath-sworn, spammy armies. They're also very good against other sort of elite infantry armies, but the thing is that, you know, they're actually fairly easy to beat. Spartans are very, very easy to beat if you know what you're doing. It's one of those factions that I just have not much respect for. So, anyway, I think that if you play as the Spartans, you should play them sort of aggressively. Don't, you know, just form them into a box. What you'll see a lot of people do, and it's really boring, is they'll take their general and they'll take one other unit of Royal Spartans to sort of anchor their formation. They'll take a whole ton of these Spartan pikemen. You can get about this many of them if you want. And then you just take about this many of these slingers. You can get rid of one of these, and you can even take artillery. So let's go ahead and take a Greek ballista there. Let's upgrade one of these guys to another hero Sparta or something, I guess. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. And now you've got yourself a sort of Spartan noob box that's just going to sit there and be tremendously irritating. It's just going to sit there. It's not that hard to beat. Don't take this. Take a more aggressive, forward-moving army with Spartans. It's not going to be balanced. It's not going to be interesting, but unfortunately that's what the Spartans are, is that they're sort of one-dimensional and uninteresting. That's how they win fights, is with these really excellent melee infantry. That's their only real strengths, so use it to your advantage. Anyway, I hope you found this informative, and as always, I hope to see you all next time.